Hey, what's up guys, Noah here for Adafruit. This week I got a really cool project for you. This is a 3D printed morning star, or better known as a mace. And the head is actually printed in transparent PLA. Why? Because inside we have a NeoPixel Jewel that has 7 NeoPixel LEDs. On the outside we have composite PLA steel fill, which you can actually polish and sand down to give it this nice reflection. Inside the rod is completely hollow, and we have a wire that routes all the way to the handle, which is printed in wood filament. Inside the handle we have an Adafruit Trinket and a 2200 milliamp LiPo battery to give you plenty of time for cosplay. In the back here we have a push button that's metal and has a red LED ring, so it looks really nice and fancy. We're going to show you how to put together the circuit, how you can 3D print the model. It's completely modular, so let's check it out. The head of the mace is actually an icosahedron, which has 20 sides. It also features 19 spikes, which are non-lethal. To build this project, we'll need a push button, a NeoPixel Jewel, a JST breakout, and an Adafruit Trinket. I designed this in Fusion 360, so it's parametric, which makes it pretty easy to make adjustments. Most of the parts are hollow and will 3D print without any support material. The D20 shell is about 1mm thick. The outer shell is split in half so that they can be printed separately and glued onto the shell. The tips of the spikes are rounded, so they aren't too pointy and pretty safe. A NeoPixel Jewel will clip into this base, and that attaches to the bottom of the D20. The rod, handle, and pommel have threads on the end so that they can twist together, making it really easy to assemble or take apart. And that's pretty much the design. You can of course download the source and STLs, they'll be linked below. I 3D printed the handle in cork fill, which is a wood PLA composite from ColorFab, and this looks pretty cool and it has a nice feel to it. The two halves of the D20 frame was printed in stainless steel PLA from Protopasta. The pommel was printed in a silver colored PLA, but this could be any color you want. I made sure to print the D20 shell in a translucent PLA, that way the NeoPixel LEDs can be diffused. And here's all of our parts, a total of 28 pieces, so it's a pretty good amount of 3D printing, but definitely not enough to burn through a whole spool of filament. For the wiring, I repurposed this old USB cable because it's pretty long and it has all the wiring that we'll need to connect the NeoPixel. So I chopped off the connectors using a pair of snips and removed some insulation to reveal the individual wires using some wire strippers. I only need 3 wires for the NeoPixel, so we can remove one of them. The 3 wires will be for data, power, and ground. We can strip these wires and tin them by adding a bit of solder, and then we can wire them into the NeoPixel Jewel. Then I went ahead and threaded the cable through the NeoPixel holder piece and installed the NeoPixel Jewel by pressing it down until it clipped into place. Next, I threaded the cable into the cap piece and then through the rod. Now you can twist the cap onto the rod until they're fully tightened. I proceeded to thread the cable into the handle and then twisted the handle onto the rod. We'll need a bit of glue to permanently secure the NeoPixel holder to the cap. Here I'm just using super glue. And now we have our main pieces assembled. Next we can work on the push button and tin up those leads by adding some solder. We'll need some extra bits of wires to connect the button to the rest of the circuit. I'll add a wire to the positive lead of the LED on the push button, then another pair to the negative and positive pads on the bottom of the Adafruit Trinket. A bit of heat shrink tubing will make it easier to solder 2 positive connections to the common lead on the push button. Next, I can add a wire to the positive pin on the JST breakout and another to one of the ground pins. The ground connection from the Trinket will go to the remaining ground pin on the JST breakout. Then the positive connection from the JST breakout will go to the normally open lead on the push button. The remaining ground connection from the JST breakout will go to the negative lead on the LED of the push button. Now we can test out the circuit by plugging in the battery to the JST breakout, and if everything's all good, our LED from the push button will light up. All that's left to wire is the 3 connections from the NeoPixel Jewel to the Adafruit Trinket. So that's going to be data, power, and ground. With all of our wiring done, we'll proceed by inserting the JST breakout and trinket through the hole on the bottom of the pommel. Then we'll press the push button down until it snaps into place. Now we can do a final test, plug in the battery, and see if everything lights up. So we can fit the battery into the handle by carefully stuffing until it's all the way through, and do the same for the JST breakout and Adafruit Trinket. We just gotta be careful not to rip any of our connections. So once they're in a good spot, we can then twist the pommel onto the lower part of the handle until they're tight. Okay, now we can work on the head of the mace. Here I'm using E6000 adhesive and adding a small amount to the inside of the haft. Then I'll lay the shell over the frame and firmly press them together. I'll do the same to the other half. To keep these two tightly held together, I placed a small 2.5 pound weight on top and let the adhesive cure for about an hour. Afterwards, I placed the NeoPixel holder onto the opening of the shell and inserted some machine screws. I fastened 3 of these screws and secured the shell to the rest of the assembly. The last part of the build is really easy. All we gotta do now is just glue the spikes onto each of the faces on the Icosahedron. I used super glue here because it dries really fast and it has a pretty good hold. And that's it. Now we have our awesome 3D printed mace with NeoPixel LEDs. That's going to be it for this one, guys. If you do want to remake this project, be sure to check out the links down below. Even if you want to make a new project, you can reuse the components to make a staff, a sword, any type of cosplay prop. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will mace you later.